name is Pete Deeley. My partner in crime, Professor Hubo, is doing the good work of teaching and being a new parent, so it's just me solo today. As a new parent, he's, I'm sure, a little sleep deprived, so submission coffee is certainly is part of his day-to-day life. You can subscribe to submission coffee at thejujitsumindset.com. About 5 months ago, me and Professor Rob had a great conversation. He was good enough to come back and continue the talk. So, Professor Rob, thanks so much for making time.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, often on the podcast, we're talking about the power of Jiu-Jitsu and to change a person's life and, the role that it often has in bringing community together and so on and so forth. But it's also a combat sport. It's about, fighting in a very real way, right? And so today I thought we could organize our conversation around those ideas. And I know you have a deep history in the area. So I just wanted to ask you, if I ask you, what's your most memorable role or your most memorable fight, what pops to mind? What comes up?
Oh, good. Do we do those separately? Like
Oh
role
yeah,
versus
please.
match versus yeah.
Yeah.
I'll answer the match one because that's the easiest because there's one match that probably even then like I'd say there are two match. Can I give you two?
You can give me two.
Okay. So for those that aren't aware, like I compete in the Masters division. I've done fairly well. Like I've won Nogi Worlds in my Masters division. But I don't have an extensive competition history. So like I had one Nogi tournament at brown belt, but other than that, my entire competition repertoire, career, whatever, was at
Right.
black belt, right? Like
Wow.
I didn't do a gi match until I was a black belt.
Wow.
So and I'm not a very good athlete. I'm the classical like nerd that does jujitsu because you can use your brain to beat people up. So the people that I compete with, especially when we're going into like some of the bigger higher level tournaments, have vastly more competition experience than I do.
And may I
And
ask, how old were you and your black belt career began at what age? Because I know I'm older than you, but I'm
so
curious.
I got my black belt in 2012. So I would have been 36.
Okay. So
Yeah.
conceivably, the at black belt, obviously, the length of time you can be a black belt in somebody's life, right? You might be competing with someone who perhaps had many more years as a black belt, never mind total
Yeah.
jujitsu. Yeah, okay. So you're
Well,
36 at the beginning.
yeah. And so like from start to, when I won Nogi Worlds a couple of years ago, like everyone I faced had more competition experience than I did. It's only recently that, here and there, if I compete at a local tournament, I might get someone with less competition experience than me, but by and large, like if I do an IBJJF event, if I do an ADCC Open, if I do anything like that, people have way more competition experience than I do. And so like, I mean, I've had enough experience in like, in gyms and training with various people. Like I kind of know where my level is at,
Right?
but gym level and competition level, if for those of you that have never competed, you have no idea how much worse you're going to be when you step out and compete than you are in the gym by and large. So I never take it for granted that I will be able to beat someone in competition just because, I could be quite a bit better than you at jujitsu. I've certainly had people that I've competed with come and visit me at my gym later on, and when we roll in the gym, it is not close. Whereas when we rolled in competition, it was close sometimes. So
Right.
I'm well aware that I'm quite a bit better in the gym than I am in competition. So a lot of what I'm dealing with when I approach certain matches is, I know that person has way more experience than me. Um, Sometimes that doesn't matter because frankly, my jujitsu is just that much better that it
Right.
cancels out the experience difference. I've had two matches that I went into them firmly believing that I had no chance to win.
Hmm.
or I shouldn't say no chance to win, but like,
Right.
a vanishingly small chance. Um,
Right.
and I won both of those matches. And so
Wow.
those are the most memorable matches. The first one was against Todd Margolis, who is he had just won Pans right before we faced each other. We faced each other at Nogi Worlds. He is so literally the first competition footage I ever saw of jujitsu, of grappling, was a Grappler's Quest highlight in the like mid 2000s
Right.
that featured Todd Margolis triangle choking Pablo Popovich, who went on to win ADCC. So like I had a match against a guy who was like, this guy beat a guy who won ADCC at some point.
Right.
And so I was just like, well, whatever. I'm here. Fuck it.
Pressure's off. Pressure's
Yeah,
off.
exactly. Pressure's off. I rolled the dice, and like I won that match by the skin of my teeth. It was by advantage, et cetera, et cetera. But it was up a weight class. So like he's
Okay.
a medium heavyweight. I'm a middleweight. So that was a huge eye opener for me in terms of like imposter syndrome. Basically, you're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
hey, maybe I'm pretty good at this. Like I know I'm pretty good at coaching, and I know I'm
Hmm.
pretty good at rolling sometimes, but I'm certainly not really good at competing. It certainly wasn't at that point.
Right.
So that was and just in the way that I was able to do it, using like really pretty technical movements and good guard retention, and him being really known all for his wrestling, and
Hmm.
being able to use like counter wrestling and put him on it. Like I actually scored takedown points
Wow.
on him using a Kimura like sweep, but still, so the manner in which I was able to score, and the positions that I got to where I was able to threaten some submissions, it was surprising to me. I would have thought that the only chance I had in a match like that would have been to pull guard and maybe score a sweep.
Right.
So yeah, just the stature of the opponent, his
Right.
history, his skill level, et cetera, et cetera. That was a really impactful match, because it showed me that like, yeah, this like I belong at
Right.
this
Right.
level. Um, but then a couple of years later, like the year that I won Nogi World, so 2023, I had a match at the Vancouver ADCC Open against a guy named Dave Porter. He is a really like well-established black belt with a long competition history, and not just that. In terms of like quality of competition, when I compete in IBJJF, I am master, 2, 3, 4, whatever age I am. That's who I'm competing against. It's a
Right.
pretty like it's an equal playing field, right? Like whatever
Hmm.
else comes into it, they weigh about what I weigh. They're about my age,
Right.
and the folks in IBJJF overwhelmingly tend to have like the folks that are competing in IBJJF tend to have a certain skill set.
Okay.
Um, so this match in this ADCC Open was in the, at the time, ADCC only had a single master category, which started at 35.
Okay.
And this was Dave's first masters match ever. He had only ever competed at adult.
Right.
He only did the masters division because a buddy of his was doing the adult division,
Hmm.
right? Because I looked at his name in the bracket. I'm like, what is this guy doing here? And again, all those same thoughts that I had about Todd
Right.
Margolis came up with Dave, where it's like, okay, I know who this guy is. I've seen him compete for this amount of time. Like his last match prior to the competition there was an ADCC rules match against fuck, now I'm blanking on the guy's
That's all
name,
right.
but he's a top 10 like adult division
Okay.
black belt, and Dave like flying scissor heel hooked him and submitted him in like 30 seconds. So like, I'm facing like at age whatever 47, 48, I'm
Right.
facing essentially an adult division competitor whose last match was
Right.
against a top 10 adult or like what last tournament featured a match with like an elite level John Combs. There you go.
Okay, there we go.
He flying scissor heel hook John Combs.
So yeah,
So
his last match was a highlight reel on some.
was a highlight reel submission on like a really really good adult
Right,
division professional competitor black belt. So like I'm going into this match with like, or I'm going into the bracket knowing that like we're gonna face each other in the finals.
hmm
So this is how like um highs and lows of confidence can be. Where like I was 100% confident that I was gonna make it to the finals, and I was like 0.5% confident that I could win in a matchup with Dave, just because his both the fact that like the level that he's competing at, which is quite a bit higher than the level I'm generally competing at, but also his skill set. Like, when I go up against guys on IBJJF, I'm not really worried about getting submitted. I'm
right,
not even really worried about getting like scored on, other than in kind of like a chintzy way. So like if you catch me before I can pull guard and maybe get like you chintz out takedown points on me, or there's
right,
some weird like I got scored on last year at Worlds because we went out of bounds. Like so stuff like that will happen.
right,
But like other than that, like you're not passing my guard, you're probably not sweeping me, you're definitely not going to mount me or take my back. In my weight class, I've never had my guard passed, I've never been scored
right.
on with anything other than those kinds of like kind of chintzy things.
hmm
So because the skill set in IBJJF is very much like, it's certain positional stuff. And yes, of course, people can submit you, and I'm not saying I can't be submitted.
Right,
Like I've
right.
been submitted outside of my weight class, so I'm not saying it can't happen, but I'm generally very confident that like the IBJJF type grapplers, they don't really have what it takes to like flash submit you.
Okay.
Whereas Dave's skill set is basically this dude can pretty much highlight reel you from anywhere, right?
Right.
Like he is known for like I researched him, I watched his matches. He can leg lock you, he can darce you, he can like basically
Yeah,
anything
he's got
from
a
anywhere.
huge repertoire. Right.
He doesn't need to go through the hierarchy. He doesn't need to take you down, pass your guard, take your back, and then choke you kind of thing.
Right.
So I knew that like in terms of danger level for being submitted, like I this was by far the toughest task that
Right.
I ever faced.
Uh-huh.
And I came up with a game plan, and I did a lot of work with a couple of my black belts, just like in the weeks leading up to it. And I was like, okay, if I can walk the tightrope for the 5 minutes, and then God help me if it goes to overtime. I
Right.
did feel like I could probably outposition him,
Okay.
but I didn't have much confidence that I could submit him, and I had lots of confidence that he could submit me. And the way the match ended up going is, he went to try to pass my guard, and I immediately put him in a triangle choke.
Oh,
And I didn't finish the triangle. He has the some of the best submission defense, certainly the best submission defense I've faced in
right.
competition. And I've rolled with him since in the gym. We're friends. And he is a like just incredibly talented escape artist.
hmm
So like he basically spent about 4 minutes in my triangle,
Okay.
and then we went to overtime. And in overtime, I managed to hit a takedown on him. And then after that, he put me in a darce. And I managed to defend. So like literally
Okay.
all of the stuff that I kind of planned for
Right.
happened. And I managed to stay like just kind of calm and present enough to execute that narrow pathway that I had to victory. And so that for me is probably my most meaningful
Yeah.
win, just in terms of like quality of opposition, in
Right.
terms of the circumstances, in terms of the tournament, like how I was able to sort of rise to the occasion. That that win probably holds the most significance for
Yeah,
me.
those are dramatic stories. I mean, those are amazing, amazing stories. And the things that I'm curious about. I mean, you used the term, imposter syndrome, which everybody experiences at whatever level, like in small promotions and whatnot. But these are pretty big stages of the
Hmm.
jiu-jitsu world and victories against meaningful opposition. So I, I I think what I heard is it sort of revealed to you about yourself that all the hard work and time and effort and thinking and effort had in fact resulted in something special. I mean, is that you
Yeah.
belong to be
So
where
I
you
mean,
were at?
Well, so it's meaningful for a few reasons. All the reasons that you alluded to, but also I'm a bit of an iconoclast, right? Like I do things differently.
Right.
Certainly, I think the jiu-jitsu world is catching up to a lot of the stuff that I've been trying to put out there for a while.
Yep.
But there's an element to it of validation
Yes.
that the methods that I'm using are effective. Like if a nerd like me who doesn't have a lot of bravado or like, it's not that I'm not confident. It's just that I don't believe the like fake it till you make it macho like false
Right.
confidence stuff that people put out there. Is frankly all that valid. And I think it's misleading, and I think it's actually actively harmful for a lot of people. I think there are a lot of really poorly modeled behaviors
Right.
in jujitsu, and I think that for someone like me to be able to, put forth the ideas that I put forth and say the things that I say, and be able to kind of stand by that and be able to still have success. Like I said, I think it's really validating, and like I know there's a lot of debate about like role models, whether or not someone's a role model, blah blah blah. But like I do take the fact that some people do follow what I do pretty seriously,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I do want to be a good role model to
Sure.
the extent that I think that it's my place to do so. Like there are things that whether it's athletes or like very very minor internet celebrities should be looked to and shouldn't be looked to.
Right.
But to the extent to which I can model good training practices, good state of mind,
Right.
all of that stuff, I like to do it. And so, yeah, like it's validating for me to be able to go out there, even under circumstances where I don't believe I have a good shot at winning, and find ways to win.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
because I think there's an underdog kind
Sure.
of like whether it's a story or whether it's a reality. There's a it's important for, again, especially with what's going on in the world nowadays, it's important for underdogs to be able to like come out on top once in a while.
Without a
um
doubt. And so I'm curious. I mean, so in a sense, like this reveals to yourself a certain thing to hang your hat on as a validation of this departure. Like if you're going to depart from orthodoxy,
yeah,
you mean everybody can depart from orthodoxy, but is it valuable? And so in a
yes,
certain sense, it's a validation of the value of this departure that's saying, hey, community, you should consider these things. So if it reveals that, I'm curious if it also if there's any change that takes place pre and post these wins. Like, do you approach teaching in the things that at the moment might be considered less orthodox with more confidence because you're like, look, I can point back to what was an unlikely outcome, and the ideas and principles that I brought to that contest yielded a favorable outcome. Like, did
oh
it
yeah,
make you more confident, or was it
well,
did it
so
change you in any way? I guess, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it changed me. And so one of the things that competition success, especially competition, so like, what's the best way to put it? Like, there's a there's a lot of so I'm trying to like string like several thought
Okay.
patterns together here. Well, let's just like to refer to back to validation. So,
Right.
I mean, I'm a guy who has come along with a bunch of stuff that was not the regular methodology for teaching and training, et cetera, et cetera. And for the longest time, one of the easiest ways that people can dismiss you in the jiu-jitsu community is
Right.
to say, yeah, but he didn't compete, or yeah, but
Yeah.
he
Right.
didn't
Right.
win. It's like when it comes to validating what somebody is about,
Right.
you can engage with the ideas themselves,
Hmm.
which may or may not be like valid. The ideas themselves, like the things that I've said about how I believe we should train, about how jujitsu is, lacking a strong conceptual element, about using, constraints-based approach to, gamifying stuff to learn about, like, all of this kind of stuff. Like, you can engage with that or you can not engage with that. But until you get certain results as a competitor,
Right.
people in jujitsu can completely not engage with anything you're saying
Right.
and just be like, yeah, but that guy hasn't won whatever. So anytime you have good results in competition, even though I think like I think it's a shame. I don't think this is a good thing.
Right.
I think that our community is still in a pretty like infancy stage
Sure.
of a sport. And a lot of the attitudes are frankly like stunningly ignorant. Just because of who is generally like at the forefront of our community and how stunningly ignorant they are about basically everything outside of jujitsu. Like there's a lot of very, very uneducated, like really stupid people who are at the forefront of the jujitsu
Okay.
community.
Okay.
And so bad ideas, when you have that at the forefront, bad
Right.
ideas linger and fester for much longer. Like there are still, like jujitsu clubs that actively use the crayont, mentality and say that it's bad to cross. Like even after all of this time, you know. But why would you weed out a bad idea when there's so many bad ideas in the ether jujitsu that don't get
Right.
called out? So like I think one of the bad ideas in jujitsu is that you must be a like outstanding competitor to have validity as a coach.
Right.
That doesn't exist in other sports, right? So I may disagree with that notion, but me disagreeing with, like you can disagree with the laws of physics.
Right. Right. Yes.
It
Yes.
doesn't mean anything, right? So I can disagree with the fact that that's how the jiu-jitsu community judges people, but the fact of the matter is it does.
Right.
So being able to point to, oh, I've won Nogi Worlds or I've won an ADCC Open, and at my age against this level of competition, etc. It just it validates me in that now when somebody goes to dismiss anything that I'm proposing based on, like, they can still try to argue the merits of the actual thing I'm proposing,
Right.
but that's all that's left. Now you can't
Yes.
just be
Yes.
like, oh,
Yes.
this guy
Yes.
hasn't
Yeah.
done anything, he hasn't
Sure.
won anything, he hasn't coached anybody, he hasn't done this, he hasn't done that. So the
Yes.
more of those like accolades that I was able to
Yeah.
rack up,
Right.
the easier it is for me to have the discussion based on the merit of what I'm presenting and not be unfairly dismissed.
Makes sense. And I think the world, as it looks to evaluate anything, it's most people are not inventing things. Most
Mhm.
people, are looking for to be taught and
Yep.
to find teachers. You're in a circumstance of, well, how do I evaluate the quality of this teacher if I'm not an expert myself? So those
Yep.
outcomes, I think, are very natural sort of places that people look to figure out, well, what, how closely should or shouldn't I be listening to it? And unfortunately, then the places in which they're being misguided, it's hard to know that until you have some experience and some points of reference of where what you're being taught is not helpful. I'm curious. I mean, when you look at other people that you feel good about, that you think are doing great work besides yourself, who out there do you think is perhaps the fullest expression of what jujitsu as a martial art could be? I mean, do you have people, either contemporaries or in the past, however you might want to talk about it, where when you look to somebody to go, regardless, they may not be a great champion because that's not maybe that may not be the rubric that you apply to
Mhm.
who's the fullest expression of it, but who comes to mind and why?
Um, well, if we're gonna restrict it to jujitsu as a martial art, um, like in the sense of like we want it to be combatively
You know what?
applicable.
I'll let you pick in terms of like who
Well, so
comes
because
to mind. Yeah.
I can give a few different names. So for
Yeah.
me, if we're
Yeah.
going to talk about jujitsu as a martial art, I will always veer towards the folks that have achieved like a high level across the board. So for that, I mean gi competition, no gi competition, and MMA.
Okay.
So if you haven't like gotten to a fairly good level with all three of those,
Okay.
then we can have a discussion like, if it's jujitsu for jujitsu's sake, for like grappling, let's just say as far as grappling goes, then we're talking about different people, right? Then we're talking about, the people that I've trained with that I would put in that category would be Cayotera and Marcelo Garcia. Those are the two
Right.
people that I have personally trained with, personally rolled with, where I just think that how they are expressing the art
Yeah.
is on a completely different level to
Yeah.
just about anybody else I've ever trained with. Although I'll say that Ryan Hall is probably also in that discussion. Um, just in terms of a like a fluidity,
Yeah.
rolling with, particularly with like in different ways. So like, rolling with Marcelo Garcia is like rolling. It's like is it like if you're on top, it's like rolling with someone while standing on a floor covered in ball bearings. Like you can't get set. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing else that feels like it. And rolling with Cayotera is like rolling with somebody who isn't there. Like it's
Okay.
like rolling with someone who can phase in and out of matter. It's again like there's nothing else like it.
Right.
I've rolled with people who are just very good. They're very slick technically. They can move in a very fluid way, but nothing they're doing seems in the moment like it's breaking the laws of physics.
Right.
Whereas those two guys are like almost doing that. So in terms of like just pure jujitsu, I'd say those two. Um, in terms of overall, I would say that Damian Maya is the guy that I
Okay.
would most refer to as like, this is a guy who won, worlds in the gi. He won ADCC. He
Hmm.
was at like an elite level. He never won the UFC championship, but he fought for the championship. He has
Right.
beaten people at the absolute highest level
Right.
of MMA and using jujitsu, because so like, it's different when you come into MMA from a jiu-jitsu background and you're a jiu-jitsu champion and all that. And then, you're a super athlete and you're knocking people out. You fall
Yeah.
in love
Yeah.
with the hands, all that stuff.
Sure.
But we're talking about a guy who came in and basically said, I'm going to beat you using jiu-jitsu in an MMA contest in
Right.
an era where everyone was doing everything. You didn't have such crazy specialists
Okay.
the way that he like we were past that point and he was
Hmm.
still making it work. So yeah, I think for me, Damian Maya is kind of like the epitome
Yeah.
of jujitsu as a martial art across the board in every way, and not an overly athletic guy. Basically, did it all with his brain.
Okay. Yeah.
So on my kind of like Mount Rushmore of
Yes. Yes.
jujitsu, or people that like I aspire to
Yeah.
train with. I've never had an opportunity to. It's a bucket list thing for me. I have just immense respect for Damian Maya as a practitioner. He's also an outstanding coach. Like some of his early instructional material that I watched was very influential on me.
Okay.
Like I'd say, obviously Ryan Hall is my primary influence as an instructor, but
Right.
I think Damian Maya also deserves a lot of credit, especially when you factor in the language barrier. Like I'm
Right.
sure that if I spoke good Portuguese or I spoke any Portuguese,
Right. Right.
if he spoke better English, there's a level of understanding that I could gain from him that would be much higher than what I've gained. But
Right.
just what I've been able to gain from studying him has been pretty transformational. So yeah, I would give Damian Maya probably more credit than any other
Okay.
jujitsu person ever, as far
Do,
as like
do,
expressing it as a martial art across the board.
oh, great. Yeah. Without any constraints, here we are in a situation in which the rules are stay alive, submit. And he was
Yeah.
able to bring that. I before we wrap up, I am curious when we talk about like Marcelo Garcia. Do you think that we're in the territory of just something in Marcelo's genetics, or I mean, are those skills of we talk about like defying the laws of physics. Is it acquirable, or are these just things that they're unique because the genes fit together in a certain way, and they have tools available to them that are not even teachable because
Oh, absolutely. So I don't think it's just genetics. So I don't want to get like too like rabbit holey, but are you familiar with genotype versus phenotype and that
yes.
distinction? Yeah. So like obviously there's a genetic component, but I don't think certainly again I'm no I'm no scientician, but like I don't think there's a gene like a specific gene that's just coded for like next
With
level grappling.
Without a doubt. And my
Yeah,
intent being just like something learned versus something
of
inherent. That's, I
of
guess, where I'm
course.
at. Yeah.
But I just I think it's a combination of the two. I think like
Okay.
anything, there are genetic predispositions that people have, and those genetic predispositions are going to meet with the environment in a way that cause
Yep.
magic to happen. So like any entelechy, any complex adaptive system, it's going to be the result of a lot of things coming together. It's timing, it's opportunity, it's who his coaches were, it's who his training partners were, it's who
Yeah.
he is as an individual. Like there's so many things that come together, but on a you know on a fundamental level, there are human beings that are just gifted
Oh yeah,
in
that's right.
certain ways.
Yes.
And like if you gave me two lifetimes, I would not be able to roll the way that Kyotera rolls.
Right, right.
Right? Like I am maximizing my genetic potential. And that's the
Yeah.
other reason that I like, we're talking about validation to go back
Sure.
where we were talking about earlier, is the validation that somebody like me who is not genetically gifted in really any way other than with like a little bit of intellect,
Right, right.
but like athletically, physically, in terms of like resilience, I get injured more easily, and I it takes me longer to recover. My cardiovascular fitness takes a tremendous amount of work just to get to a baseline level where I'm okay competing, and
Right.
whereas some people can just like they just have great
Yeah.
VO2 max,
Yeah.
just genetic. Like I'm basically like I've got most of the limitations that you could put on someone who's trying to be good at a combat sport.
Right,
Like,
right.
put it this way, I could never be an MMA champion. I could never be a kickboxing champion. I could never be a wrestling, judo. Like, none of the other combat sports would somebody with my physical limitations. Like, I
Right.
would not be able to compete at a world level in any of those. I don't have
Yeah.
I just don't have the genetic components.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, I
But in
think
jujitsu,
right.
it's validating that you can use your brain to do that. I think that's going away. I think at the high level, we're just getting to the point where the athleticism requirement is too high.
It's
No one that
exceeding.
isn't,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, like I'm only competing at the masters level. I'm not competing at the adult level. So there's caveats to what I'm saying. But just like the folks that I'm competing with tend to be physically quite a lot more dominant than I am.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
mean,
very
and I
validating to,
yeah,
yeah.
without a doubt. And I mean, in terms of that not everybody comes into the world with the same set of gifts. Like as a college athlete in a small school Division III type of athlete. I had a friend who was the next rung up, and he was a Division II athlete. And I was talking to him some years after we had graduated, and I said, "Do you think you could have played Division I ball? Like, I mean, how far off were you?" He says, "Pete, I was pretty sure I could play Division I ball, so I went out to the local Division I school and." I was on the field. He was a football player. He's like, and I was very, very fast. I felt like I was among the fastest people I knew. And I get on the line. He's a receiver, and I blast off the line. I'm going as fast as I can, and the guy guarding me is running backwards.
Yeah, yeah.
And I realized right there and then, like the guy didn't seem particularly to look at him like he was a differently. He wasn't very built in any different manner, but
Mhm.
there was something about the way he moved that was very different than the way my friend moved. So, I mean, some people
The
just,
jujitsu world, like most of us that are training in like regular academies, we're not at Atos, we're not at B team, we're
yeah,
not like day in day out. We're not training with like the peak, the elite of the sport.
yep,
Um, Most of us have no comprehension of like what the level of distance is in athleticism from like with the guy that you think is really athletic. I mean, this is true for any,
Yes.
like, your high school growing up. If you were the fastest, the
Right.
best basketball player in your high school, and then you
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
to the university, and then you go to like the best guy in most rooms is
Right.
like a pretty dog shit athlete by like world standards, right? Like you go into
Yeah.
95% of jiu-jitsu clubs and
Right.
pick the most athletic guy that has ever come through that club,
Right.
and that guy will not make the like he couldn't be a bench warmer on the Olympic
Sure. Sure.
wrestling
Yeah.
team,
Yeah.
judo team, whatever. We do not select for athleticism nearly as much in jiu-jitsu as we do in other combat sports.
Right.
And like I said, that is changing.
Yeah, I think, and as more, frankly, as more money comes into the
Exactly.
environment, the
Yeah.
the more that will change. I mean, certainly international soccer is the biggest sporting in the world, and they
Bingo.
found Mbappe, at age 8 in Africa, in Africa. I mean,
Yeah.
and you know what? They were right.
Yeah. This is what I'm
Like,
saying. Like
yeah,
we in jiu-jitsu, because it's such an unsophisticated sport, our methodology for selecting for who is, gonna do what is really poor. Right. So like there are so many things about jiu-jitsu that are not even close to optimized practices. Um, Obviously the low-hanging fruit is just coaching style and like practice design.
sure.
That's
Yes, yes, right,
something
right,
that we can very easily fix because we can just look at what other legit sports do, and that's all I try to do. Like anytime people try to give me credit for inventing anything, I'm like, I didn't invent a damn thing. I just looked at what more legit sports were doing and tried to bring some of that approach to jiu-jitsu.
right.
But in terms of like that kind of stuff where like until there's real money
Yeah,
in jiu-jitsu, like why would anybody come and do this training and play this sport when if they're any kind of athlete, they could do baseball or soccer or
sure.
football or hockey, whatever. Like there's so many sports that are going to select for better athleticism. So yeah, some of it is just being a really naive, like not very well developed sport, in terms of like methodology, but some of it is just the money. Some of it is
Yeah,
just
well,
like
yeah,
there's
this
not
it
that much
just
money.
it just changes it changes every the whole ecosystem when there's a lot of money in that. But I mean, in just referring back to the differences in levels of athleticism,
Yeah.
and I've had just a few opportunities to be among people who are elite, as and th- when you talk about, like, I could live many lifetimes and I would never ever be able to achieve some of the things that I've been around, which is lovely, right? I mean, the
Yep.
world is full of incredible things, and if everybody could do every single thing, it would make what we observe out on the field or on the mats,
Well, I
less.
mean, speaking for myself, I would never have been able to become anywhere near the level of coach that I
Yes,
am
yeah,
if the athleticism stuff came easily to me.
right, right.
Because
It's a
they're
good
like,
point.
why have to innovate? Like most of the innovation that I've like utilized
Sure.
has been to help me,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Like
right.
it was to help me learn how to train better. It was to help me, like obviously it's for my students as well, and I get to
Sure.
run different experiments with my students on what works and what doesn't. But a large part of my initial sort of like systems for learning and for training and for teaching that I came up with was I'm under a time constraint. I only have so much time to go to these places and train with these people. I need to get the most out of it that I can, and I get injured more often. And I get into this like I've got time constraints.
Sure.
I've got physical constraints. I got all these kinds of things. So if I was just like unbelievably physically talented and could just be super good at jujitsu without a lot of work, I would not have been for it was a necessity is the mother of invention,
Yeah, I was going to say,
right?
constraint often gives us the
Because
reason to put
a
the
hundred
energy
percent.
into, right, to do that.
So that the success that I've had is because of that.
Right.
And the fact that I can compete at the level that I can compete at, given the physical limitations that I have,
Hmm.
not that they're limitations, I just mean like relative to
Sure.
somebody who is gifted athletically. I'm not crippled,
Right. Right. Right.
but like I just started strength training for the first time in a while this year, and after a few months of strength training, my top black belt Rory, he said, he's like, oh, finally it doesn't feel like rolling with a cancer patient when I roll with you. Right. It's like that's the level of like
Yeah. Yeah.
physical, advantage that I'm normally giving up when I train, right?
It's, that's a cruel but funny,
Yeah.
expression for sure. Yeah. Well, Professor Rob, somebody may want to, come and learn from you. And I know you have an amazing teaching schedule that takes you sometimes on the road. Where can people find out about how to learn from you?
Yeah, so I mean, if you follow me on Instagram at Island Top Team, and my online academy is called BJJ Concepts. So you can also follow the online academy at BJJ Concepts on Instagram. And I generally post, my seminars. I do seminars all over the world. Well, all over the world is probably a bit of an exaggeration, but certainly North America and Europe at this point.
Right.
The Without getting into it too much, North America is probably going to mean more Canada and less America
Right.
over the,
Right.
the next little while for hopefully obvious reasons. And if they're not obvious to you, I don't know what to tell you. But like I do have affiliates in the US that I have to travel to, but like I think like most people around the world are trying to reduce their amount of reliance on having to interact with the US. That is something that is a consideration for me.
Right.
So I will be doing more seminars in Europe and elsewhere. Again, not saying that I'm not going to do any. It's just it won't be as easy to find me in the US as it used to be. But you can learn from my online stuff at bjjconcepts.net or .com. And if you're interested in coming to visit and train with me in
Right.
Nanaimo, British Columbia, Canada, just go to islandtopteam.com and send us an email or just message me on Instagram, and we can hopefully set something like that up for you.
Man, that sounds awesome. All right, Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.